Welcome back to the program. Turkish forces have moved in north of Syria just hours after the U.S. announced its withdrawal from the area because it has become too expensive to keep troops there, so says President Trump. That might sound like good news, say there's something Turkey has an ulterior motive.
The Turkish offensive has intensified in northeast Syria ever since troops moved in to take over from U.S. forces said to be pulling back from the area. By Friday, they had reached the third day of military action. The offensive has killed hundreds already and forced tens of thousands to flee, causing concern for world powers who fear Turkey's offensive could open a new phase in Syria's war and deepen regional turmoil. The European Council President Donald Tusk chastised Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan on Friday for threatening to send millions of Syrian refugees to Europe and blasted the Turkish operation in northern Syria as destabilizing the region.
Turkey's unilateral military operation in northern Syria is of grave concern and should stop. Turkey's security concerns should be addressed through political and diplomatic means. A military intervention will only make matters worse. Instead of creating stability, it will create even more instability in the whole region, exacerbate civilian suffering, cause further displacement, and threaten progress achieved by the global coalition against Daesh.
Turkey, which still formally aspires to join the European Union despite mounting EU criticism of Ankara's human rights record, was stung by EU criticism of its air and land offensive against formerly US-backed Syrian Kurdish fighters. Even Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned that Islamic State militants held in northeast Syria could escape as a result of the Turkish operation there. During a news conference, President Putin pointed out that there are areas where ISIS combatants are concentrated who have until now been guarded by the Turkish military, and as Turkish forces entered the area, the Kurds would leave the camps where the ISIS combatants are kept who could run away. U.S. President Donald Trump has been ramping efforts to persuade Turkey to halt the escalating offensive as it was causing great harm to ties and the country could face potentially devastating sanctions.
So Turkey and the Kurds have been fighting for hundreds of years. We are out of there, but we have a tremendous financial strength, which I've helped a lot with because our country has become much stronger since I've been president by many trillions of dollars. And if Turkey does something that they shouldn't be doing, we will put on sanctions the likes of which very few countries have ever seen before.
Even the Arab League has waded in. Its Secretary General Ahmed Abu Ghait on Saturday condemned the offensive into Syria during an emergency meeting for the body called by Egypt. He called on the League to reinstate Syria's membership in the body. The Turkish President Tayyip Recep Erdogan remains defiant, saying Turkey will not stop its operation against the Kurdish YPG militia in northern Syria, no matter what anyone says. Speaking at a dinner in Istanbul, he said Turkey has been receiving threats, but the military offensive would continue until all YPG militants withdraw from northern Syria. EU governments have threatened sanctions against Turkey, rejecting a warning by Mr. Erdogan he would open the gates and send 3.6 million refugees to Europe if they did not back him. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says President Donald Trump has authorized U.S. officials to draft very significant new sanctions to target Turkey. Kurds across the world have been protesting against the Turkish incursion. The UN, on the other hand, continues to be concerned about the tens of thousands displaced by the offensive.
Over the last 48 hours, tens of thousands of people have been fleeing their homes as a result of the escalation of conflict in northern Syria. And hundreds of thousands more are at grave risk amid active hostilities as cold weather sets in. I have echoed the Secretary General's call for respect for international humanitarian law by all parties. It is also important that aid agencies, including UNHCR, have access to civilians in need to help avert a deepening humanitarian crisis.
Can Brexit still take place on October 31st? Some of Britain's neighbours have given up, while others believe a Brexit deal is still possible just a couple of weeks to the EU deadline.
Brexit is only a few weeks away, and yet Britain has no deal and no certainty of one, though the Prime Minister Boris Johnson still has his fingers crossed that his latest proposals to the EU can pull through. But there's no clear understanding on what becomes of the Irish backstop and Britain's membership of the EU Customs Union. And the more he's probed, the less he has begun to say. On Friday, he said he did not want to give a running commentary on Brexit talks when asked whether Northern Ireland would be leaving the EU Customs Union amid hopes that an agreement can be found before the October the 31st deadline. He encouraged reporters to look back on what he had said previously.
I think it would be wrong of me to give a running commentary on the negotiations, and why, with the greatest possible respect, I think look at everything that I've said previously. I think you can draw your own conclusions from that, but let's let our negotiators get on. I think where Leo Varadkar and I got to yesterday was a joint feeling that there is a way forward. We can see a pathway to a deal. That doesn't mean it's a done deal, so there's work to be done.
On Thursday, Mr. Johnson met with the Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar in a last-ditch effort at averting an acrimonious divorce or another delay after Brexit descended into a public row between London and Brussels. French President Emmanuel Macron has maintained a hard stance on Britain's exit. He told a press conference on Thursday that Britain would have to pay the price should it decide to proceed with a position over Brexit that is unacceptable for the other 27 European Union countries.
If they want to make a move which is compatible with what could be accepted by the 27, it is fine. If they don't want to make any move and make something which is not accepted, they will have to take the responsibility. And at the very end, this is a British responsibility, either to make a Brexit without agreement or to withdraw Article 50 and stop the process. But at the very end, this is a British decision.
The German Chancellor, on the other hand, is more interested in minimizing the negative impact of Brexit on both Britain and Germany if Britain were to leave the European Union in a disorderly manner. Sources said of a last conversation with the British Prime Minister that the chances of a Brexit deal were essentially impossible.
We had a constructive meeting with Steve Barclay, the British team, and now I'm going to debrief the 27 ambassadors and the Brexit steering group of the Parliament. But as already said, that the Brexit is like climbing a mountain. We need vigilance, determination, and patience.
He made the comment days after he said the EU could not accept the latest proposal from London and that sealing a Brexit deal with Britain ahead of October the 31st would be very difficult. Spokesperson for the EU Commission, Mina Andreeva, said the EU was working towards a deal with Britain.
We are working towards a deal because this is the determination to arrive at a deal. And I think if there is a will, there is, of course, a way. Otherwise, people would not be working on this.
And this is where we end the program this week. Thank you once again for joining us. And join me again next time. I am Amarachi Ubani.